Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Mont, and this is my review of Anthem, played on PC. Disclaimer time, this is not a sponsored review. I got access to the game through the EA Origin Premier subscription thing, as I figured £15 for a month that the game was better than paying full price for it. Plus you got in a week early. That out of the way, well, let's get started. What is Anthem? Well, in a nutshell, Anthem is a loading screen. Beyond that, it's what some people refer to as a looter-shooter. Think Destiny or Warframe to some extent. You will also get a two-piece game here. The first part is a hub area wherein you walk around in first person and can talk to NPCs, with a limited dialogue responses now and then, meaning sometimes you can pick between two responses. There is no karma or honour system though. The other part of the game sets you loose in a large area in which you pilot a Javelin. Think an Iron Man style suit you climb into, with thrusters that allow you to fly around and hover. Flying is the first basic gameplay mechanic on display here. It is enjoyable to me and I find it satisfying to fly around the world. Your suit's thrusters will overheat if you fly too long, and you can cool it off by either staying on the ground or flying through water. Flying close to water will also keep it cooler. It's a very simple mechanic, but one that feels organic and easy to manage. As for those Javelins, there are 4 of them: the Ranger, Colossus, Storm, and Interceptor. Now, if you've played Destiny, wherein the classes are essentially reskins of each other with different coloured grenades and different supers, you'll be pleased to know that Javelins are slightly more diverse and unique feeling in Anthem. The Ranger is your go-to all-around soldier man. He's average at everything. He's equipped with a shoulder-mounted launcher and a supply of grenades. His ultimate ability is a barrage of micro-missiles, basically the exact same thing as Tone from Titanfall, only scaled down to human-sized missiles. Actually, they're not human-sized missiles, they're missiles that a human could fire, because Tone's missiles, well, those are actually human-sized. Maybe I didn't word that too well, but whatever, let's move on. The Colossus is my favourite looking of the bunch. He's a huge tank archetype. He can't hover as long as the other Javelins, and his suit has no regenerating shield, because he instead has a literal shield that you can bring out at any time to block incoming attacks. You can use it to run up and clobber enemies with it too. Think a little like Reinhardt from Overwatch. The Colossus also has a shoulder-mounted mortar and a wrist-mounted cannon. His ultimate involves pulling out a giant gun out of his butt and shooting 3 giant exploding bullets. It's neat. Next up we have the caster archetype, the Storm. Able to hover longer than any of the other Javelins by a huge margin, the Storm gains augmented shields when hovering, and is able to use 2 different spells: Focus Seals and Blast Seals. This Javelin focuses more on elemental attacks than the others, and their ultimate involves casting an explosion of lightning, followed by an explosion of ice, and finally casting Ecliptic Meteor in your best Behemoth impersonation. It's probably my most played paired with Colossus. And finally we have the Interceptor, your ninja archetype. Far more nimble and agile than the others. It can jump 3 times, it can dodge 3 times in a row. The Interceptor zips around with those triple jumps, and is able to make extensive use out of the acid element, with shurikens and the like. Their ultimate involves becoming invincible and going ham on enemies with a powered up melee for duration, a little bit like Genji's Dragon Blade. In a nutshell, every Javelin has 2 abilities they can use frequently, a support ability they can use infrequently, and their ultimate, which, well, you should know how ultimates work. There are different types of your 2 offensive abilities. For example, for the Storm you have your Focus Seals and your Blast Seals, and you have a bunch of different ones. For example, you can throw fireballs, you can throw ice balls, you can throw some sort of flaming dragon thing, you can throw electricity that bounces around. For your support abilities, everyone has 2. The Storm, for example, has a wind wall, which is basically a big energy wall which blocks projectiles. Or you have the quickening field, which makes your abilities recharge faster. Every Javelin can also equip 2 guns, assault rifles, machine pistols, heavy pistols, sniper rifles, shotguns, marksman rifles, light machine guns, and the like. The Colossus is also able to use 2 guns the others can't, the heavy weapons, autocannons, and grenade launchers. Likewise, you can enhance your Javelin by equipping components to them. These are effectively things that make you stronger, such as giving you more shields, more ammo capacity, and all that sort of stuff. One thing I enjoy very much about Anthem is that your armor's appearance is not at all tied to your stats. You essentially have 2 sides. One is your stats and gameplay, the other is cosmetic and appearance, so you can use any piece of armor that you like visually. And the customization of your Javelin is a lot of fun, it's quite in-depth. You can change the colour of your suit as you might expect. It's split up into about 5 component pieces, I believe, roughly. And you can also apply vinyls onto them, and much to my delight, you can change the material of those 5 individual parts. For example, this Storm's little cloak. Do you want to change that to being made out of metal? Then go for it. Who doesn't want to see a cloak made of metal flapping about? You can even change the wear state of gear, making it dirty, clean, and so forth. So of course my main goal in the game has been to create javelins of such silver radiance that I've no need for peasant weapons such as guns or abilities, and use merely the reflection of my armour to burn out the retina of those foolish enough to look upon my gross incandescence. Anyway, it's a third-person shooter in an open space where drops follow the now classic system of white, green, blue, purple, yellow. Missions involve doing various tasks in this open space and often heading into adjacent areas such as cave systems or dungeons. Worryingly, these are separated by loading screens. Then you have to go back to the first-person hub area to speak with NPCs and customize your Javelin. There's also a social space launch bay room which I've used exactly twice, once when the game forced me to go there, and once near the end of the game where I had to go there because otherwise I couldn't do anything because it wanted me to do the final mission and I didn't want to do the final mission yet, so I had to go to the launch bay to navigate around that. It would be a nice option if you could make a sort of clan launch bay or a guild one, but whatever. So, what works in Anthem? The combat, for the most part. I have fun flying around and zapping enemies. The game has some nice visuals, such as the designs of the javelins, and the premise of the setting has some potential. Some of the facial animations in cutscenes is very believable. I don't have any in this video, because the only cutscenes I believe I had access to at the time were endgame ones, and I didn't want to make a new character just in case it was going to overwrite my existing character, and due to the game's bugs at the moment I just didn't want to risk that. So you'll either have to look up some cutscenes on YouTube or just take my word for it. But some of the facial animation was nice, especially compared to Mass Effect Andromeda. The graphics look nice, but come with a large caveat I'll mention later, but you might have noticed it by now if you're looking in the top left corner of the screen. The sound design has some really nice touches to it, although sometimes the audio cuts out completely, which, I mean, it's only happened once for me, but it's annoying. But then, what doesn't work? Oh boy, just about everything else. One of my biggest issues with Anthem is that it often had me saying to the friends I was playing it with, this feels like a game made by 5 people and they had no QA, no testing of the game whatsoever. See, there are so many design oversights in Anthem that it's actually mind-blowing to me. The game was developed by BioWare, who had an estimated 800 employees in 2010. Now I'm sure that number has changed since 2010, it's probably shrunk, I'm assuming. But let's assume that 50 or even 100 people worked on this game. How did none of them think of any of these things? Or if they did, why were they not fixed? Was there any QA? I know for sure that there was a closed alpha because I was in it. There's also a private and public demo that they released, which were actually more like betas. They shouldn't have called them demos, but let's not get into semantics. Either way, there's no excuse. If a cool indie game has a lot of issues, I'll roll with it, because those guys don't really have the resources to intensely QA and test a game. Not compared with EA, who have to be in the top 5 game publishers in terms of profits and games released and all that stuff. I could sit here for an hour and list out every single small issue that the game has, but instead I'll just mention a few obvious ones. When you're in a squad, every single mission that every member of the squad has is shown on your map, with a huge part of the interface given over to describing that mission, but the majority of that box is empty and could easily be filled with, say, text stating which member of the squad has that mission. For example, let's say Jim, Bob, Gunther and I are in a squad, and I hover over the mission Cave Pump. The game should tell me which members of the squad actually have that mission, because if it's a story mission, or some mission that I've already done or haven't got yet, then I'd like to know that I don't actually have that mission. So I know who it's coming from, you know? How about this? The game shows you your backpack of items you've picked up in missions, but you're incapable of doing anything to it. It just shows you, say, you've picked up 5 blue items. It doesn't tell you what your item limit is. It doesn't give you the option to discard maybe some common items that you don't really want. At one point in the game, you are set a bunch of roadblocks in the story, where in order to progress you need to do a bunch of arbitrary challenges such as kill 30 enemies with your ultimate, and so forth. So me and my friends chunked most of them out in free play expedition in the map. Problem is, I eventually hit my item cap for items, and then an epic item dropped and I went to pick it up and the game told me, screw you, arsehole, you can't pick it up because your inventory's full. Why are we allowed to look at the items we've picked up but not do anything with them? Why do we have no warning that we're about to fill up our inventory? I would have gladly discarded some of those items to make room for the better items. There's no warning you're getting close to capacity. You will only find out once you reach it. There are so many more examples like that. If you're more than 2 feet away from your squad when they get near an objective, say you wanted to grab a chest or some resources but your team's zooming off, then you'll be teleported to them, which involves a loading screen. This tether is very unforgiving, even after the day 1 patch. And in regards to that roadblock I mentioned, see, I sort of understand the purpose behind that, but it was executed poorly. One of the requirements is that you need to revive other javelins, not sure if NPCs count, and that's like, what? I can't think of many other games that would essentially require you to wait for someone to die so you can revive them in order to progress the main story. What a bizarre choice. When I was doing it, it was also designed in such a way that you had to open 15 chests. So if my friend opened a chest, I would get the items, but it didn't count to my progress. They've since patched that. Good news for you if you're going to be playing like now. BioWare had a somewhat similar roadblock system in place for Dragon Age Inquisition, where it was so egregious that it made me stop playing the entire game. In that one, it was effectively, hey, if you want to continue the main story, you need to obtain more story credits by doing these boring side missions first, lol. Which is one of the most stupid moments I've ever had in my 20 plus years of playing video games. Optional content isn't optional if you have to do it, and if you have to do it, don't make it lackluster side content that feels like pointless filler. Now, briefly to touch on the story of the game, as I know a lot of BioWare fans are primarily interested in these games for the worlds and characters that inhabit them. Anthem disappoints here. The main villain for the game, let's start with that. So, BioWare have always seemed to pride themselves on being a story-heavy studio, with games with strong narratives, character developments, and so forth. Irrespective of the actual quality of the stories in their games up to this point, it's kind of looking bad for Anthem. And the main villain is a great example of that. He is a literally faceless enemy who wants to destroy and remake the world for no real reason. And if there is a reason that's given in some, like, codex information somewhere, then good for you for finding that, but I wasn't about to read the codex entries in this game, because frankly, they aren't that interesting. Some of them are a bit funny though, I'll give them that. And a main villain's motivations should not be in what is effectively side content. It got me thinking of, what was the bad guy in Mass Effect 1? I think his name was Saren. I'm not saying he was like a 10 out of 10 villain, but he had motivations, and they were ones that even if you didn't agree with, you could probably understand his motivations. He wasn't just, "Grr, me want destroy." And you could resolve his storyline in several ways, including, well, you didn't even have to fight him. You could convince him that he was mistaken and he would pop himself. Spoilers for like a 12-year-old game. The player character can be male or female, and you can choose from some preset faces, but other than that, nothing. You can't, customize anything other than choosing, male or female, and you never see your face in the game, so it's like, why bother? They also have absolutely no personality. You are the most generic, well-meaning character imaginable. During the whole game, and every side quest, every contract, not a single hint of personality comes forward beyond some very slight sarcastic snark or sass, which BioWare seem to be really fond of, and it's not clever writing, it's the opposite of that. It's lazy and bad writing, because no matter what happens, your character either has a sarcastic remark, or at times a kind of whiny, bitchy response. Like when you're looking for a journal and someone takes it from you, your character goes, "Hey, give that back," sounding like a whiny kid. There are other characters around the hub, most of which fit some sort of trope. There's a tough mechanic lady, there's a socially stiff military lady, socially awkward, slightly less military lady, cheerful goofball princess who isn't regal at all lady, annoying fanboy-esque character, like the adoring fan, and what was the dude in Mass Effect? Conrad Werner? That dude? I'll be honest, none of the characters feel very interesting to me, and almost all of them have extremely predictable outcomes to their personal stories. Like, there's even an old amnesiac lady who, she's not amnesiac, she's just demented, and she's like, "Oh, you are my missing son," and you're like, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Oh, yes, you are." It's like, stop, you're making me cringe. The only characters who felt like actual characters to me, who had, some sort of motivations, kind of developments, and all that, stuff you would expect from characters in media, were Owen, Faye, and Halleck. The rest just felt like caricatures. There's no reason I can see to care about them. Talking to them gets you tiny reputation boosts, which aren't really super important. They never led to side quests or anything beyond, "Hello character, tell me another story." Okay, bye now. All of which are just talking head segments. The characters never move or do anything. They just stand there waiting for you to glide over and engage with them. In one of them, I was talking to a character, and my character said, "Hey, where's this other character?" And they went, "Oh, they're out on an errand." They weren't. They were standing there right next to the other character. It's crazy when you realise Mass Effect was, 10, 12 years ago, and did that better by the same studio. And they consciously spoke in the development for Mass Effect 2. They were saying like, yeah, we want to make the conversations feel more natural. We don't want characters to just be standing there waiting for you. And when you're talking to them, you don't want to be like standing, floating heads. They're going to be, moving around their room or their quarters, doing something, interacting with the environment. None of that is here. And it's very awkward, stiff, and video gamey, and especially bad coming after a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, where the characters are always moving around and feeling like they have something to do other than just standing still, waiting to be spoken to. But now I have to talk about all the other technical aspects. The caveat I mentioned earlier. This game is optimized poorly in that there appears to be no optimization whatsoever. Having to run a game at medium to hit 60 FPS consistently when you should be capable of running it at ultra is not a good sign. All the footage in this video is at ultra, maxed out, every setting maxed out at 1440p, and I'm running on a 1080 Ti, which should be more than enough for a game like this. I've not ever had the chance to check my CPU usage. I know one of my friends was consistently getting like 90 to 100% CPU and disk usage on this game, and those seem to be fairly common issues. There are a lot of bugs. Some are funny, not a big issue. Others are game-breaking. Everyone I played with has encountered losing all of their audio completely until a full restart of the game at least once. But one of my friends has encountered a bug where enemies were invisible for him consistently, although that might have been more on his PC's end, I'm not sure. Then we have the loading screens. Oh boy. I have this game on an SSD, and the loading times are barely tolerable as is. There's a mission that has you load the mission, fly into a cave, load the cave, leave the cave literally 2 seconds later, and load the game, the whole open world again, and then return to the cave a few minutes later, loading it again. If you lose connection, or crash, or just need to go back to quickly change something in the Javelin, or dismantle some items, it's going to take you a long time. It even feels like it has to load the menus. Let's talk about the UI, shall we? In combat, it's fine, you have the information you need, although there's improvements that need to be made. For starters, we have our squad info on the left-hand side of the screen, you might see it in some of these clips. That's awesome, but put in ultimate bars as well as health and shield. Outside of combat, the UI is a nightmare. It's over-designed, over-complex, slow, has loads of wasted space, and it's just poorly implemented. Menus in video games should be fast, snappy, and responsive. You can't go into your menus in this game if you are downed. That's really dumb. Imagine if you go down in a situation where the game has bugged out and you can't be revived or respawn. Well, tough luck, you just have to close the game. You can't bring up the menu and exit out of the mission. Good job. If I want to move from one menu tab to the other, it should be in the blink of an eye, not a sluggish crawl. And it feels like the menus are locked at 30 FPS or something. It's really weird and jarring. Also, you get hundreds of items in this game, meaning you're going to be dismantling hundreds of items. Dismantling an item takes a good 2 seconds, if not more. Now, imagine you have 100 items to dismantle, individually, one by one. The game thoughtfully has the option to mark an item as junk so that you can then mass dismantle them all. Problem is, marking an item as junk also takes about 2 seconds, and when I mass dismantled 50 items at once, the game freaked out and kicked me back to the main menu. There's also a lack of sorting options. There was the day 1 patch recently, which improved the loading times a little bit, but not much. It didn't improve performance very much, but on the bright side, it does allow you to fix one of the issues prior to that where you couldn't turn motion blur off unless you turned another setting off. This game needs loads of optimization. I should be able to run it at 60 near consistently on my rig. I don't mind, if I'm running it at ultra and occasionally it drops down to 50, maybe the mid 50s, but hovering around the 45 mark? No. And this is on the Frostbite engine, so I know it's an issue with this game because other Frostbite games run a hell of a lot better than this. Now, you might say, you're being too harsh on the game. You're basically in early access because I played 90% of the game, no, 95% of the story before the day 1 patch. But that's out now. It's fixed a lot of issues, I'm not going to deny that, and I'm sure they will continue to keep patching. But I don't feel bad reviewing the initial product. It wasn't like this early access was hard to get. It was available to anyone and everyone who wanted to pay £15 or dollars for the game instead of full price and play it for a month. This is what reviewers are reviewing. This is the game, so I'm going to review what is here, not what might be here. There's no reason to release a game in this state. All of this said, I am mostly enjoying Anthem. I'm having fun playing it with my friends. Goodness knows, the game tries its best at times to prevent that. Speaking of playing with friends, another issue with loading screens, if I load a mission first, I get the opening narration for that mission. When my friend loads in, they don't get it at all, so he misses out. Smart. Just another reason why this game feels kind of amateurish in a lot of ways. Despite Destiny coming out in 2014, feels a lot more advanced than this game. In Destiny, I can load Earth, zoom on my sparrow to a dungeon, and enter the dungeon without any loading. It'll seamlessly put me into my own instance with my friends. Anthem's comparisons here has load screens out the wazoo. There's a solid framework here though. The most important part, the gameplay loop with combat and flying, is there. As my friend described it, you get that sort of, dopamine hit when you use an ultimate on a bunch of enemies. It feels good, it feels satisfying to land combos. It can only be improved there too, because it's a strong groundwork, the combat and the flying. It's fun and satisfying. The rest of the game needs a lot of work. Things like the UI and the small issue I mentioned can be fixed, although the UI needs to be completely redone. You need to be able to change your Javelin without going into the whole Forge thing. You need to be able to change it out in free play, maybe going to the Strider, dropping off your items, or just dismantling items from your backpack. The boring NPCs and pointless dialogues that are close to being vocalized audio logs or journals can't really do much about that in the base game, but in content going forwards, maybe they can do more about that. Have cutscenes with NPCs that aren't just floating heads. So here's the crux of the matter. Can I recommend Anthem? Despite all of these issues, yeah, I can. See, with the Origin Access stuff, you can effectively subscribe for a month, play the game, and complete it in that time, move on to something else. Alternatively, pick it up in a sale at some point. It's not worth full price right now. And of course, this all comes with the disclaimer, if you have a friend to play it with. If you have 3 friends to play it with, even better, you'll have a full squad and you won't have to rely on the randoms being nutty. If you don't have anyone you know to play it with, I would honestly give Anthem a miss, because it's not gonna be all that fun. There's a day 1 patch which is, fixed some issues, and I imagine they will patch the game more, but I'm a little skeptical of EA. See, Andromeda got slammed on release, kind of like how Anthem is being slammed right now. They patched that game a few times, then they effectively buried it, cancelling all the DLC. Is the same thing going to happen to Anthem? I hope not. I think there's some real potential here. And I really hope, that they're going to fix this game and make it something good. If you have any questions, please do ask them down below. But I hope this review has been useful or entertaining, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching. Ciao. Next review, by the way, is going to be Devil May Cry 5. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be a lot more positive than this one. Have a good one.
I like this one that just stands right in the middle of everything.
Because it's a treasure map. All those missing people carried valuables into the jungle.
Wait for it.
And when I find them, I'll be rich. You shouldn't have chased me, Dex.
You shouldn't have robbed me, Talon.
It's what I do. You knew that when you hired me.
You hired these people? That's how they got your journal?